The message came at midnight: cancel your Tahoe trip. Mom's medical bills are due. We need you. My suitcase was already zipped shut by the door. 3 days on the lake, peace I'd been craving for months. But guilt is a sharper blade than desire. Without hesitation, I wired them $2,800, nearly everything I'd saved. Of course, I texted back, "Don't worry about me." But worry is all I did. 7 days later, I logged into our family's shared email. A habit, something I'd done since college, when Mom used to forward me coupons and Dad's old tax reminders. That's when I saw them: cruise tickets. 2 staterooms. Departure, Miami. Passengers, Mom. Dad. My brother and his wife. My sister and her boyfriend, everyone except me. Not a single mention. Not even a lie to cover the truth. My stomach twisted. The money wasn't for bills. It was for cocktails on the deck, matching polos. Photos in front of sunsets I wasn't meant to see. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the confirmation email until the screen blurred. My name is Claire Reynolds. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever realized your parents never saw you as family, only as a wallet they could drain? That was the moment I stopped being their daughter, and I started becoming something else entirely. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not even the morning after. I just walked through the motions: coffee, shower, work, like a ghost in my own life. My body moved, but my mind was trapped on that cruise ship. I could see them already: Mom sipping daiquiris, Dad in his ridiculous straw hat, my siblings laughing while the ocean swallowed the horizon, and me? I was the bank. Nothing more. The rage came later, quiet but electric, curling in my veins like storm clouds. They thought I'd never find out. They thought I'd swallow it, like always, but silence has weight. And my silence was about to crush them. I started small. I stopped answering their calls. When my brother texted, "You okay?" I let it rot unread. When Mom sent a photo from the cruise, everyone lined up on the deck, matching Hawaiian shirts. Forced smiles. I just saved it. Evidence. I began gathering everything: old bank transfers, Venmo screenshots, the email confirmation of the cruise. Years of loans I'd sent them. Thousands of dollars I'd wired with nothing but trust. A pattern started forming. A family portrait, not of love, but of debt collection. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to cut them out so cleanly, so surgically, that when they finally noticed the silence, it would already be too late, and that silence, my silence, would be the sharpest revenge I'd ever deliver. I practiced disappearing like it was a language: soft, exact, deliberate. First, I erased the obvious threads: family photos tagged with my name, the Reynolds label on streaming accounts, my preferred playlists. I unsubscribed from joint calendars, removed emergency contact from forms, and let my voicemail fill with their muffled apologies. Each small deletion felt like a scalpel cutting through skin until something vital bled out: their right to expect me. Then I changed the patterns they relied on. I moved my rent to autopay from a different account. I shifted passwords. I opened a new email I never shared, a new number that routed to silence when they tried to reach me. When Dad called, it went straight to an unfamiliar greeting. When Mom left a voice message about, "How could you?" the recording collected dust in a folder only I could hear. They didn't notice at first. They were sunlit and salty in pictures, too busy perfecting their tan to check whether a daughter still answered when they called. That complacency is the dangerous commodity of family. It teaches them how little they need you. At work, I wore that indifference like armor. People asked where I'd been. I said, tired and busy. I started bringing up trivial things about finances in coffee breaks: how easy it is to forward money, how quickly accounts can be opened and closed. I learned the language of numbers, the soft power of paperwork. The more I read, the less naive I felt. The panic I'd stifled at my kitchen table hardened into clarity. The money I'd sent them had weight. It could be tracked. It could be accounted for. It could, in small ways, be taken back, not in a courtroom, but in consequence. I didn't want their money. I wanted the recognition that they'd taken advantage of me. I wanted the apology I'd never receive and the tremor in their satisfaction when the ground shifted under their feet. So I built leverage they hadn't seen coming. I stacked proof into folders: screenshots, transaction histories, the time-stamped cruise confirmations. I printed copies, then shredded them, then kept digital ghosts in encrypted drives. I opened a spreadsheet and labeled every favor, every loan, every casual transfer they described as 4 bills. The sums read like a confession: months of mortgage help, utilities paid, emergencies purported and false. $2,800 was only the headline. The ledger told the true story. At night I rehearsed my next moves like a playwright with one crucial scene left: reveal. I imagined their faces when the ledger landed in someone's lap who mattered: a lawyer, a bank investigator, an adult child not yet taught to believe in parental sanctity. I imagined the unraveling, slow and merciless, of a family that had spent a lifetime assuming my silence. I wanted them to feel the exact ache they'd put into me, abandoned at an empty checkout counter while they sailed away. So I waited, precise and patient, and for the first time in my life, I stopped waiting for them to change. They had taught me how to disappear. Now I would teach them how to notice. The silence I'd once nurtured turned into a plan that would not be gentle. *I think revenge tastes different when it's served slow, like coffee gone cold and then reheated, all the bitterness concentrated. I traded impulse for strategy. I stopped wanting to dismantle them with noise. I wanted to unmake the safety net they'd spun around themselves and then called family. The first move was practical. I called my bank, not to beg, but to ask questions. I learned the exact names of forms, the cadence of disputes, the way a flagged account will hiccup and cough until someone notices the irregularity. I spoke plainly, careful to leave no passion in my voice. Bureaucracy is an indifferent beast. It rewards documentation and punishes stories without timestamps. I gathered mine. I sent polite emails to customer service with attached screenshots, titled them cleanly: unauthorized transfers, request for review. I wasn't asking for their money back. I was making a record that would not be easy to ignore. Then I set snares of a different sort. I let a quiet rumor do the work my voice never could. An anonymous tip dropped into an old family friend's inbox, just a line: curiosity enough to open a memory. Did you know Claire has been sending money for years? It read like a question, not an accusation. People are natural investigators when the subject is someone else's secret. The friend forwarded the message with a trembling "Is this true?" And suddenly, the family's polished facade had a crack. I didn't engineer scandal so much as reveal the cracks that already existed. Behind the cruise photos were whispered debts, half-answered texts, small humiliations that add up. Once someone else's curiosity was sparked, stories began to leak. Aunt Lisa texted me, confused and sorry. A cousin asked if I was okay. The family group chat, the one where they'd posted sunlit smiles, filled with a nervous static I'd never heard before. Who paid for this? When did Claire send money? Did we all chip in? Their certainty was slipping, and the slide felt inevitable. My siblings swung between disbelief and defensiveness. My brother sent a single message: we'd never do that. My sister attached a photo of Mom laughing, the ocean like glass behind her, as if proof of happiness could erase proof of theft. But as the questions multiplied, their certainty thinned. The more they defended, the more they exposed half-truths. Dates that didn't match, excuses that folded under the light of the ledger I'd kept. At night, when the house was mine and the city hummed muted outside, I'd open the cruise confirmation again and stare until details rearranged themselves into evidence. I imagined them strapped into chairs on that ship, the sun painting their cheeks, while the world, my world, continued without them. I imagined the quiet panic when bank calls would come: we're reviewing recent transfers. I imagined the small, sharp shock when their collaborators, the ones who'd assumed the money was a simple kindness, realized it had been taken by habit, not need. I did not rush to be cruel. I orchestrated a slow unspooling. The first thread pulled, then another, until what held them together, habit, assumption, convenience, came undone. They had expected my silence. They had never once prepared for my insistence, and when their ship sailed back into port, light and bright and stinking of salt and sun, the harbor would feel strangely empty, like a stage with the lead actor missing. That absence would be my message. They called me selfish before they called me by name. They texted in bursts, accusations serrated like broken glass. How could you do this? You're ruining us. You never asked. Their outrage was loud and clumsy, the sort that tries to fill up an absence with noise. I let it clatter against my silence. The bank's reply arrived the same day. We're reviewing recent transfers. Please supply documentation. I sent them my ledger, clean, clinical, absolutely unforgiving. Every $150 for rent help, every $60 for med copay, every $2,800 wired on a promise. The bank didn't comment on family morals. It only counted entries and timestamps. Paperwork doesn't care about love. Paperwork opens doors. When the first subpoena-like letter, really, a preliminary notice, hit their inboxes, the family's polished veneer fractured. My brother lashed out at my sister in a group chat. My sister typed apologies that tasted like sugar. Old grudges flared, unpaid college tuition, a forgotten car note, a Christmas present that never materialized. They began to accuse each other because it's easier to point outward than to look inward. I watched the unravel from a distance I'd cultivated deliberately. When my phone vibrated with a barrage of calls, Dad, Mom, my siblings, I let it pulse into the background. Let them drown in the sound of their own panic. Let them taste the disorientation they'd given me for years, but there was a moment I hadn't planned for, the sound of Dad's voice, raw and small, in a voicemail that arrived at 2 in the morning. He sounded older by 10 years. The man who once taught me to ride a bike was now the man whose voice crumpled at the edges. Claire, he said. This was wrong. I'm so sorry. We didn't mean, Mom's not well. She fainted on the deck. The doctor, his words stumbled. Confession and pleading braided together like smoke. Can you call me back? Please. I let the message sit in the darkness of my phone like a live thing. My chest opened and closed, a door I hadn't expected to find unlocked. Rage isn't one note. It's an orchestra. In it there are flutes of fury and low drums of grief. Hearing him sound small made the drums louder. I could have used that voicemail as a bargaining chip. I could have printed it, sent it to every inbox listed in our family tree, framed it as the final proof, admission wrapped in panic. Instead, I saved it in a folder marked with the date, like an archive of the moment the ship began to list. The bank's investigator called again and spoke without pretense. We can freeze accounts temporarily if there's probable cause, she said. We can reverse transfers if they're found to be unauthorized. She sounded like a lighthouse, steady, indifferent, inevitable. Legal consequences were no longer theoretical. They were a tide pulling at the pier.at home. That night I scrolled through the cruise photos one more time. Mom, hair windblown, laughing with a cocktail. Dad, sunburned and laughing too. The image felt thin now, like a postcard with the ink smudged. Behind the smiles were ledgers, subpoenas, a voicemail, and a bank that had begun to move. I hadn't wanted their downfall to begin with fear. I wanted recognition, not ruin. But recognition is a blade that cuts both ways, and the people on the other side were suddenly bleeding in a way that made me dizzy. The next morning, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. Subject line, from the ship. No sender. The body contained a single, bloodless sentence, we saw the transfers. We didn't think it was that bad, until today. The email had no signature, but I knew whose hands had typed it. My sister's boyfriend had always been the weak link, polite to a fault, uncomfortable in lies that weren't his. He'd watched them take, and take, and take, and now the paper trail I'd lit like a fuse had finally reached him. His one line, we didn't think it was that bad, was more than guilt. It was fracture. It meant conversations were happening behind closed stateroom doors, voices raised in panic as the sea slapped against steel. By the time they docked, the silence between us had become an unbridgeable canyon. I didn't greet them. I didn't ask how the cruise was. I just waited, ledger tight in my grip, while they stumbled back onto land with tans that looked more like burns. Mom called first. Her voice was thick, defensive, trembling with the kind of fear that hides behind anger. Claire, we need to talk. These accusations. The bank. People are asking questions. You don't know what you've done. I almost laughed. I knew exactly what I'd done. I'd lifted the mask they wore for decades and showed the world the face beneath. Greedy, desperate, ungrateful. I know what I've done, I said, voice like ice. I stopped paying to be forgotten. The line went dead. That week, the fallout spread faster than wildfire. Aunts and uncles whispered. A cousin who'd loaned them $5,000 for roof repairs called me in tears, realizing it had probably gone to the same Ocean View cocktails. Their friends, the ones they boasted to at church and over backyard barbecues, suddenly remembered the quiet inconsistencies. Didn't they say the mortgage was paid off? Why did they need money again? Gossip turned into suspicion, and suspicion turned into shame. They tried to fight back. Dad sent me a long text about loyalty, about how families stumble, about how money doesn't mean love. But the words were hollow, clattering like loose change in a pocket. He didn't apologize. He only pleaded for silence. I gave him silence, but not the kind he wanted, because silence now was absence, my absence. No holiday calls. No birthday cards. No seat saved at the table. They reached out into the void, and the void answered back. The cruelest part? They started turning on each other. My sister accused my brother of knowing. My brother swore he'd never asked. My mother blamed Dad for lying about the bills. Dad blamed everyone but himself. Their unity, the same unity that had excluded me from the cruise, crumbled, and all I had to do was nothing. One night, I played Dad's old voicemail again, the broken, pleading version of the man who once raised me. I listened not for his words, but for the silence between them. The hollow he dug with years of betrayal. That silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of my revenge. Collapse doesn't happen in one strike. It happens in echoes. The first echo was financial. My parents called me in desperation, voices jagged, strained, because their checking account had been temporarily frozen. Not permanently. Just long enough to make them sweat. Just long enough for their bank manager to ask pointed questions about patterns of repeated transfers. Their mortgage payment bounced. Their credit cards flagged. Suddenly, the world that once bent to their whims stiffened into bureaucracy, and they had no shield but panic. The second echo was social. Their friends stopped answering calls. Church pews, once lined with sympathetic nods, now held whispers instead. People avoided eye contact, as though my parents' shame was contagious. Aunt Lisa blocked Mom on Facebook after an argument in the comments spilled over into full confession. The very cruise photos that had mocked me now mocked them, shared, screenshotted, dissected as evidence of fraud. The third echo was familial. My brother turned his anger into venom, telling anyone who'd listened that he'd never seen a dime. My sister screamed over the phone at Mom, words so sharp I almost flinched when I overheard them through a mutual friend. They weren't united anymore. They weren't even careful. The fractures widened until they became canyons. And me? I didn't lift a finger. Every night, I sat with my ledger open, staring at the columns of numbers as if they were poetry. Each transaction a verse. Each dollar a line break. Together, they sang the story of a daughter used until she disappeared, but there was one thing left. One last cut to make. I printed the ledger, crisp and neat, bound it like a book. On the cover page I wrote, paid in full. Then I mailed copies, not to my parents, not to my siblings, but to everyone who had ever asked me, why don't you visit more? Friends. Relatives. The family friends who treated me like a ghost while praising my parents' generosity. The truth no longer belonged to me. It belonged to anyone willing to read it. The phone rang for days. Apologies I didn't need. Shock I didn't care for. Rage that wasn't mine to hold. My parents tried to patch the holes, to claw back at dignity, but dignity is fragile. Once shattered, it doesn't shine the same, and when Dad finally showed up at my door, his eyes sunken, his voice raw, I didn't even open it. I just watched through the peephole as he stood there, muttering my name into the cold air like a prayer he knew would never be answered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left outside. I was the one who closed the door. I never opened the door when Dad came. Silence was my revenge, and it did the work for me. Their accounts froze, their friends vanished, their reputation collapsed. The cruise photos became evidence of betrayal, not joy. I finally took my Tahoe trip, alone, free, whole. The lake shimmered like peace itself. They lost me. And in losing me, they lost everything.